1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Test, test, test.
That's pretty much how he looks at you. Pointing in the direction. Like, why can't you fix this?
Testing 1, 2, 1. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me back there? Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Because we are at time, and I'd like to launch if we can. Ah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. This reminds me of many a day being in an auditorium with 3 people. I won't give you a context. I will just leave that in the air. All right. Are we ready to pull up the online guests? Are they already in, or do we?
Okay, why is this not letting me
Wonderful.
Zoom?
We're good to go? Excellent. Looking for some thumbs up from back in the corner. This is what we call signs and wonders. Thank you very much. Getting no signs, and so I was wondering. I appreciate the communication. So I understand that we have a few of our Oversight Committee members that have joined us via Zoom, so welcome into the space. I'm glad you are with us tonight. Again, this is November 10th, 2022, if you can believe it. We're rapidly running through the year. This is the last official meeting of the Oversight Committee for 2022. So for those of you who've been soldiers in this particular process and trek and committed to the work, let me express my appreciation to you. I really thank you. I thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your willingness to care about our community in the way that we do. 2 quick disclaimer statements tonight. It is a hybrid meeting, and so we're going to be going back and forth from Zoom into the live meeting and hoping, trusting that all things will work well. But this is what I've learned about technology. It is great when it works, and there are moments when it does not work. So we're going to do our best to keep it clear and functioning in that manner. The second thing I want to say in regard to the work that we're involved in, this is work that's passionate work. It's work that matters. It's work that involves real people, real issues, real situations. And because of that, there are times when passion happens. There's times when individuals will be expressive and will be authentically concerned, frustrated, and irritated. I want everyone to understand that we understand that process. And at times you may feel like that heat comes from me, and it might. But it's because this work has mattered. I've been a part of this process since 2015. I've missed 1 meeting. Traveling and a variety of other responsibilities, but because this is so important. It's important because we're setting up generations and we're trying to do something that is restorative and thoughtful and intentional and equitable. And therefore, I appreciate your understanding around that. So if you're ever in the moment and you feel like the heat is on, it might be, but it's not about you, even though it might involve you. So with that disclaimer, I'm going to go to our interim director, Molly Rogers, for your director's update. Hi, Molly.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. I appreciate those sobering but also inspiring words. Wanted to provide with you a few updates, but for the record, I'm Molly Rogers. I'm the interim director of the Portland Housing Bureau. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm happy to see all of you here today on video and in the person. One of the couple updates I want to share with you. We are starting our budget processing for 23-24 already, and part of the work we do is we glean information and input and feedback from our various different advisory committees. And this year we're going to do something a little bit differently. We're going to bring all the advisory committees together into a single forum on December 6th. This was Ms. Leslie Goodlow's idea, and I think it makes so much sense to hear from different constituencies, different perspectives, and hear how the different advisory groups have a different focus, and it's important that everyone gets to hear from one another. So stay tuned. You'll get more information and participate in that community forum. Additionally, we are commencing with our focus groups and interviews with our consultant, Sherry Dunn, who is working with community to assess and gauge the values that are important to the Portland Housing Bureau's strategic plan and to the search, to the qualities that are particular to the permanent director of the Housing Bureau. So I believe the focus group for the North and Northeast Oversight Committee is on November 29th, has been scheduled. I encourage and hope you all can make it because apparently these have been very invigorating and a lot of great discussion has come from it. From there, the consultant will help craft the job description of the recruitment, and right now we're hearing that Commissioner Ryan is hoping to launch that recruitment in early 2023. But today is, this past week has been a big week for transition at the city. Charter reform was passed by the voters, which is going to be leading to a series of different steps of transition for the next 2 years before we have a new form of government away from our commission form. So there will be, what we're hearing is 3 different committees will be convened that will require and need community input. So we're letting you know in case there's opportunities for you all to participate. The first will be a committee specific to the districts. The second is a salary committee. So thinking through a little bit of how the compensation of the new counselors. And the third is what we call a charter reform transition advisory. So more to come on that front. So obviously too soon to know how this will all play out. But we know that the mayor in January will be looking to potentially do some bureau reassignments that will help point towards this new form of government and what could foretell in terms of more permanent changes. Finally, for this group, we've got a few really great local updates. One is the groundbreaking for 5020 is going to be this Monday, and I hope you all go. Very, very excited for that project to reach the next phase in the groundbreaking. And last but not least, I wanted to make you all aware that City Council got a chance to hear a lot of the issues that our renters face right now. On November 2nd, Interim Deputy Director Matthew Schaubold and I spent 2 hours with City Council to go through what we see as call perfect storm of conditions that we see as leading to an uptick in wave of evictions. That is very concerning to us. So we wanted to make council aware of some recent trends around eviction data, all at the same time as we're seeing all the safe harbor protections have expired at the state level. At the same time as our federal and state and local resources we have put towards eviction prevention and rent assistance are all going to be depleted in early 2023 at around the same time, exactly the same time as the rental cap at the state will increase to 14.6%, which is the highest we've seen since they set the rental cap. And that is because it's tied to inflation, and no one anticipated inflation to increase to the levels of the 1980s at this point. So that's why we see these convergence of factors coming to play that is making us concerned for housing stability for renters, particularly since we see that some renters we still see rent arrears. And we still see some spikes in rents at right now with our Portland renters. So I just want to make you aware that that these are some issues facing every renter right now in Portland, and that we're put together a series of funding requests very recently to try to get additional resources through the fall bump. That's our budget monitoring process that we do at the city to try to increase our amount of rent assistance and eviction defense work to help get us some funding. We're hoping through at least the end of the fiscal year. So keeping fingers crossed, happy to update you all as that plays out that gets voted on next week.
Well, thanks, Molly. I'm curious, in regard to the presentation to City Council, were there any directions or resolutions or strategies that came out of that particular presentation?
Yes, the presentation was initially focused on some expiring projects that were funded through our multi-program, which is a 10-year tax abatement program for 10 years of affordability. So through that process, we've been working with our city attorneys to see if there was the possibility of extending the multi-property tax abatement to help protect those residents living that are going to be facing the possibility of their rent going up to market. And what that means is going through a process with not just the city but also the county, because it affects the taxing jurisdictions. But we want to propose a renewing opportunity that those developers would have to voluntarily agree to, but we want to align it with our current inclusionary housing affordability period, which is 99 years. So we don't have to face this again in just 10 years worth of time, all over again. So we would need to get city approval and the county approval to do that. We want to keep exploring that. And then secondly, we've asked our Rental Services Commission as part of that work session proposal to explore looking at our mandatory relocation assistance payments, which were set to 2017, and see if there was a way to potentially align those payments to more of an inflation factor, because we, again, didn't anticipate this level of inflation. And then last but not least, those two funding packages that came in through the fall bump was in direct connection with the data we have seen and out of that work session.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Oversight Committee, to Molly for her report? Gabrielle, any question? Okay. Ms. Jillian, I see you. Welcome. Good evening. Any questions, Jillian? Okay. And is Felicia still with us?
Felicia's on. She said that she has her camera off because she's eating dinner. There she is.
Hi, Felicia. How are you? Any question or comment? No. Okay.
Yeah, she's mute.
Yeah, well, yes, the wonderful mute button is going to be fun tonight, I am sure. So I will do my best to interpret the
The head nods.
the head nods and the physical activity. Thank you, Molly, for the update. We're now going to go to our NHP update. And again, I didn't say this, but I hope everyone has an agenda to follow along with. Our intent is to stay as close to the agenda and the timeline as possible. So, John Trent and Ira Bailey, you are reporting to us. You have 10 minutes, gentlemen.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, I should say, Dr. Holt and committee members. My name is John Trin. I am with the Neighborhood Housing Preservation, and I'm here with Ira Bailey, and we will present to you on some data and also a recommendation that we're seeking with the Oversight Committee.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Ira Bailey. I'm going to give you a couple of updates on a few programs that we're running. The first one is going to be the Homeownership Asset Preservation Program. This is a program that was developed under the guidance and the suggestion of the Oversight Committee. Again, what it does is it allows or it provides legal services for low-income families. Next slide, please. Legal services for low-income families to basically be able to create a trust. It helps with wills so that generational wealth will not be lost when an elder passes. So we have partnered with the African American Alliance for Homeownership organization. They are a nonprofit helping families with homeownership counseling for pre-purchasing, to help connect people with down payment assistance if needed. They also help people with foreclosure prevention counseling to help families stay in their homes. So we've partnered with them, and then they've partnered with the Common Law Center to be able to provide services to these families. These services are offered to families under 80% AMI. The attorneys have also offered to offer discounted rates for those families over 80% AMI, which is really great. And it helps families who live and reside within the city of Portland. The data I can provide is from the first quarter of this fiscal year, since we've rolled it over from a pilot program which started in 2021 to a full program, a full regular ongoing program now. This data is from July 1st through September 30th. Since that time, there have been 3 estate planning educational webinars. This is where they're kind of explaining to the community what the services are, trying to make that connection. 13 households have attended those, so it's not a huge turnout, but 6 program participants have enrolled. So that doesn't seem like a whole lot within the first quarter, but again, it's only 3 months, and it's still kind of at a better rate than it was when we started the program as a pilot. So comparing it to what the numbers were originally, this is not that bad. And they are expecting those numbers to grow up or grow significantly as time passes on. So next slide, please. A little bit of the demographic data of those 6 families. So 2 of those families have been between 0 and 30% AMI. 1 family has been 31 to 50% AMI, and 3 families have been 51 to 80% AMI. So one thing to consider is that the low-income families, those I'd say between 0 and 30, more than likely would not have had an opportunity to seek or receive legal services just because of the current cost of them. And then as far as race and gender, we have had 5 females, and these are self-reported. So 5 homeowners who have identified as female, 1 who is identified as male, and then a total of 5 black families or 5 black households and 1 white household. So are there any questions on the asset preservation portion?
None from Gabrielle. Any other Oversight Committee member? Give you an opportunity to weigh in. So I have a question, Ira. How is this advertised? What is the process to
So
help
this
people be
is,
aware of it?
as far as I know, it's advertised on Oz website, and then they do community outreach. So reaching out to those families in the black community. Primarily, they focused on, and the way the program is structured is that they do primarily most of their recruitment and advertising within the North-Northeast strategy area, the ICURA, but they do promotions outside. I can give you more details on that, but I will have to check in with them too.
That would be awesome. I'd love to know what the strategy and approach is for community engagement. It's such a viable program and is absolutely a necessity, not just for lower income families, for families, period, especially in light of the previous report with inflation, with the economic crunch we're in, just being very strategic to make sure we're doing all we can to help families be sustainable. I'd be curious as to how we're making people aware, so it'd be great.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Holt, on that note, we have featured it in our newsletter on 2 occasions. So we try and make sure that we provide a little bit of real estate in the newsletter for this program in particular.
Next slide, please. The preference policy as we step towards our goal. Currently, since the last meeting, which was September, I believe, we have had 2 more homeowners. So we're now at 107. We're short that 110 goal by 3. I'm still hopeful that we'll get a couple of more closings before the end of this year. And I want to give you a breakdown of those families or how those sales work. This is actually a lot smaller than I expected. So I am going to, thank you very much. So that first column is 38 homeowners with Northeast dollars. And essentially what that represents are down payment assistance loans. So 38 families have purchased with Northeast dollars, and that is PHB funded Northeast dollars within the Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area. We've had 16 families purchase with Prosper Portland dollars. The slight difference is that the Prosper Portland down payment assistance loans have a slightly higher income threshold. So those families with a higher income, it goes up to 120%. Correct. And so we were able to kind of reserve that because the PHB dollars go up to 100% AMI. So we tried to target those Prosper to those who were between 100 and 120 AMIs. And so Prosper Portland allotted us $1.6 million. That's 16 $100,000 DPALs. We got them all allocated. We had 2 families purchase in Lentz. We had, fortunately, we were able to, thanks to Shannon, acquire $1 million in construction excise tax dollars, and then the following year, $1 million in short-term rental fee dollars. And so from those, we were able to get 20 homeowners with DPALs. We had a new construction development known as the Olin Project that was developed by Habitat for Humanity in partnership with Proud Ground. That was a 12-unit condo development. We have 12 units sold in that one. We have, the funding source was tax increment financing within Northeast as well. And then additionally with tax increment financing in the Northeast dollars, that we have 2 current developments that have units for sale. One is Kenton Commons, what we call Phase 1. It's a 12-unit development. We have 11 units sold, so 1 is available. We'll kind of talk about that later in the presentation. And we have a second development with 8 current homeowners. There's an additional, it's a 18-unit development. We have 8 current homeowners for that one. And there's actually 1 person who is right now in the process of applying for a loan to purchase an additional unit. And then there are, in that one, I believe there's 2 or 3 more people who have units reserved who are in the process of getting mortgage ready to be able to purchase those units. And then we were able to help 14 families without direct city subsidy be able to purchase, but who are able to receive counseling, education, through the preference policy to be able to purchase. So currently we are at 107. Again, our goal is 110. Okay, Felicia, yes.
You may be muted. That was, thank you, hold on. If we could repeat the question into the microphone, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
So I believe what you're asking is, what was the first quarter outreach goal for, and will they meet their contract year goal for outreach as well, which expires June 30th, 2023? Great questions. There are not quarterly goals. Unfortunately, when it comes to outreach, it is based on the strategy, the individual strategy of the organization. So as long as outreach, which is an ongoing process, is being done, we don't set up quarterly goals for that. Nor do we have quarterly goals as far as participants. We have an annual goal. I believe that I will be able to meet that annual goal. I'll continue to work with them and work with the attorneys. Things that impact that ability to meet the actual household serve goal is how much services or how much work does each household need. In honesty and transparency, the majority of the funding does go to the attorneys for those services. So if there's a household that needs more attorney services, that single household is going to take up more of the supporting dollars. But also in any of the services that we provide with any of our partner organizations, unfortunately, there are high seasons and there are low seasons. And so it's not a consistent upward tick. So even though the first quarter was slow, the second quarter could be explosive as far as the families that are coming in. So at this point, it's still too much of a new program to know that, to see those trends over time. But in comparison to the other programs we have that we fund, such as our home buyer education, counseling, and the foreclosure prevention counseling, you can have one quarter that seems like they won't hit their goal, and then another quarter where it clearly shows that they will exceed it. But I can also say that based on my work with the African American Alliance for Homeownership, that organization, they always significantly exceed their goals in any program we've partnered with them in.
Thank you, Jillian.
And then Jillian had a question.
Again, technology is great when it works. Maybe, Jillian, you can put your question or comment in the chat, and we can have it read.
She's asking if we can hear her.
No, and I'm not on the Zoom link. Ms. Goodlow is, and sorry, Jillian, we cannot hear you yet.
But apparently the transcriptionist can hear her.
Oh, the
Because it's going into
transcriptionist.
the transcription of
Oh,
the meeting.
this is fun. So Zoom can hear you, Jillian, but no one in the room can hear you.
The other Zoom participants can hear.
Okay. In the meantime,
So,
Jillian, I'm going to ask you to hold until we can figure out how to get this resolved. We'll continue with their report, but we will make sure your question gets responded to.
Because all
yeah, so the developers for Olin and Kenton Commons, both phases, are Habitat for Humanity, and they were developing those units and attracting buyers directly through their programming, which targets families 0 or 30 to 60% AMI for Habitat for Humanity, and then 60 to 100% AMI for Proud Ground. Both are in a land trust model, which allows families to move in with minimal upfront cost and more affordability on the total purchase price.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
And again, if we could repeat the question in the microphone, that would be fantastic.
The question I hear is Habitat for Humanity providing the mortgage financing? That is a tricky question. The way the Habitat for Humanity models work is that their goal is to allow the family to be able to carry a total monthly payment that is about 30% of their income. So although the families do have a set purchase price, there are times where Habitat for Humanity will provide kind of a secondary loan to subsidize the total purchase price to bring that payment down so that the total cost is about 30% of the monthly income. Outside of that, however, for the first mortgage, Habitat for Humanity has partnered with the bank. It's First, I can't think of the second name right now. First Republic, thank you. They did partner with First Republic to be able to provide first mortgages to their buyers at kind of beneficial interest rates, I think, and a little bit easier on the lending criteria. So, I hope that answers that
Thanks,
question.
Ira.
Oh, thank you. Next slide, please. So it's interesting, the more families we serve, the smaller those numbers get. So just kind of want to give an race and ethnicity breakdown as well as a household income breakdown. Of those 107 families that we have helped purchase, 4 families, or roughly 4%, identify as Hispanic, 1% identifies as Asian, 3%, or 3 families, identify as multiracial. 1 family identifies as Native American, Pacific Islander. 7 families, or roughly 6%, identify as white, and 91 families, or roughly 85% of total buyers, represent or identify as Black or African American. And then when it comes to the household incomes, roughly 44% are between 61 and 80% AMI. 28 families were between 100 and 120% AMI. 81 to 100%, or sorry, 29 families were between, that's kind of hard to see. 81 to 100% AMI, thank you. And then 6 families were between 0 and 60% AMI. Next slide, please. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go into the next topic. Let's just drill down a little bit more on the Kenton Common development in terms of phase 1 and phase 2. Earlier, I indicated that phase 1, we still have 1 vacancy. In phase 2, we have 3 vacancy, and we're talking about in terms of home ownership. Given some history, the preference policy was created in 2016 for the Olin and Kenton Common and DPAL, and then we updated the preference policy list in 2019 for the 50/20 development, along with Olin and Kenton Common phase 1 and 2. I would say in terms of roughly about 1,000 applicants offer opportunity to apply for the home in the Olin and Kenton development. And right now, based on the preference policy we have, as we went through the list itself, we have about 300 individuals that are still on the preference policy. Next slide, please. Continue on the history, 50/20 development switched to a rental property during COVID, because as purchasing home ownership was difficult during that time. Portland Housing Bureau reached out to, as I indicated, to 300 people on the waiting list on the preference policy. And we worked with our partner agency like the Portland Housing Center that works with the preference policy for the Northeast area. And in 2020, and again in 2022, we invite folks on the preference policy to purchase one of the available units, which are condos at the Keaton Common. And we continue to work with them, and we work with them by sending out a letter back in September of this year, and asking folks who are interested to apply for those units. And we work with Habitat to do open house showing. And we got quite a bit of folks who are interested. Out of 300 mailing that we sent out, and also email and phone call, we had about 23 individuals who were interested in the purchase of those units. We vetted those. When you look into the available unit, we have 1 2-bedroom unit for phase 1. We have 4 2-bedroom units for phase 2, and two two-bedroom units and two three-bedroom units for phase two. And that's on the next slide. Apologize. All right. So some of the challenges that we found out from the folks who who are interested. So let's go into the next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we had from the folks who, when we work with them, is the debt-to-income ratio is too high to qualify for the mortgages. Income is too high or too low, depending on in terms of the individual who applied. Lack of response from the applicant, because we sent out a lot of mailing, and we continue to send out mailing to the folks on the preference policy list. We also heard back from the folks who responded that the units are too small. They may have a bigger family structure, and they wanted a larger size unit. Lack of parking was also another concern out of this development, because it is a condo type. Some of the family had a desire for backyard, because they have families, they have maybe pets or whatnot like that, so they like to have a backyard, more green spaces. And also, really, the desire to have single-family home rather than condo type of a model. Next slide, please. When we look at in terms of the concern from our partner agency and the developer is the carrying costs. We have dedicated a certain number of months for carrying costs of the development receive a certificate of occupancy. And it's been probably about eight months, Joe, what do you say? Yeah, about 8 months already since we received certificate of occupancy. There's also concern with break-ins as the units are vacant. Loud. Testing, okay. So with our partner agency, there's a concern with break-in and vandalism. Also, we want to make sure, we would like to get all the units sold so we could turn over the HOA, which is the homeowner association, back to the folks who are living there. There is interest from the developer Habitat and Proground as they have their own network of buyers. And they want to get those units sold, and so they can move on to the next projects for themselves. Next slide, please. So again, our latest action is we sent out 300 letters to folks on the preference policy in August of this year. 22 households were referred to Habitat. We work with them to make sure that the units are seen and people could really look into what they potentially are interested in buying. We had 2 potential buyers, which is great. Right now, out of that 2 potential buyers, 1 is working with a lender right now as they're pre-qualified. And so I'm hoping that by the end of this, I would say hopefully within the next 30 days, that they'll be able to close and be able to purchase one of the unit. Unfortunately, one of the potential buyer over income. The over income. So I think out of the 9 units that we were presenting at last meeting, we will still have about 8 units that are not sold. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay. So I guess for Aaron and I are here to present in terms of we, as the NHP team, has combed through, I should say, the preference policy list, and regarding the Kenton Common development, and we have worked with our partner agency, Habitat and Proground, and our internal staff to make sure that everyone had the ample opportunities for, regarding this development. So at this time, our team will be recommending to the executive leadership to release the remaining 8 units to Habitat and Proground network, and to get this unit sold. And it has been about 8 months since the development was completed, and to eliminate the carrying costs and the exposure of having the unit vacant. Our developer has a waiting list of homeowners ready to purchase, and we value the oversight leadership, and we'd like to have the support in this recommendation. I know tonight the oversight committee doesn't have quorum, and so probably my recommendation would be in terms of maybe create a memo send it out to Oversight Committee Monday for you all to review, and then could vote on it electronically.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
A couple of questions, though, just in terms of the applicant challenges and concerns, real quickly. I know we're over our time, but did the developer talk about some learning experience? How's this informed their work? Because I know that they're going to be approaching or responding to other RFPs, and the lack of interest or the slowness of people on the waiting list to respond to this type of housing. Are they going to make adjustments and not build more of this kind of housing? Has there been some learning?
If I'm being completely honest, I don't know that responsibility for that learning is on the developer. If a developer has a development and people are interested in buying it, they're not going to necessarily learn anything. I think for us as a bureau, that responsibility falls on us to say, what do we learn about these challenges and how do we adjust moving forward? And so I would say, yes, there have been some lessons learned. I think being that these particular developments have been in planning for our buyers since 2016, since that time, we've learned that there's a challenge in trying to market a home without having a picture of what that home will look like. So there were a lot of families who said, we're not going to commit to something we don't know what it's going to look like. To understand, okay, well, what is it that families want? We've heard back from the community that single family homes were taken. So if we're going to provide family homes, let's provide single family homes. I think understanding that it will take time for families to become mortgage ready. What we found was the most impacted families took the longest to become mortgage ready to qualify. And definitely in the current market, affordability is still always an issue. Even though home prices right now and costs are going down, per se, interest rates are still going up. So it is actually costing families more to buy a less expensive house now than it was to buy a more expensive house, say, a year ago. So these are all lessons learned that I think the Bureau can look at and go, well, how do we plan better for the development? Like, what are some of the things that we will take into consideration that we want the developers who make a bid on what we're trying to propose come to the table with? So I think that control falls upon us to still be kind of the advocates and the ears to the community.
So having said that, and again, I apologize for those who are waiting in the wings. We don't want to prolong this, but having said that, one of the things we were really clear on as an oversight committee and talked about at length was family size units. And a family size unit, if we're talking a 3-bedroom at 930 square feet, that just, to me, doesn't translate. It's not sizable for a 3-bedroom family or a 3-bedroom unit where you've got possibly 2 parents or even, well, a single parent with a couple of kids. That's a small space. And then to add to that, no green space on top of it. I'm surprised. I know I knew about the development and seen it, but I'm surprised that that's what would be offered if we're trying to address sizable units. So
Jillian has some questions. We may need to wait or have you follow up in writing, but I'm going to go ahead and read it into the record. She asked, what other options aside from selling to non-preference policy buyers have been explored? Can potential buyers who aren't quite mortgage ready rent the units until they are able to buy? What is the plan for resale? If these units are released from preference policy now, will they be subject to the restriction upon resale? And what additional funds has PHB or the City of Portland committed to help give the developer enough time to sell the units to preference policy? What about funds for security? So I know we're over time. Yep. So Jillian, we will get some answers to you for those questions. Oh, wait. And she says also if larger units, SFRs are what appeal to single-family residents, preference policy buyers, we need to look at increasing the amount of subsidy per unit to subsidy per bedroom. So we will get answers.
Yes, thank you for those questions. Those are good questions. So thank you for those.
Gabrielle, I don't want to miss you.
I had the same questions, and I also had an additional one. On the DTI too high to qualify, my question again would be, are there additional resources or dollars that could be available? Another question I have is, what are the risks of transitioning these units over to non-preference policy participants through Proud Ground and Habitat? And then the other question again is, income too high or too low? What are some subsidies that could be offered potentially for applicants that have too low who are interested? And then what are the consequences of increasing the cap for individuals whose income is too high? Like, how high is too high? Thank you.
It's quite a few questions I think would require a little bit more detail, and I definitely want to say that we're over time. But I can address the cap part. So the funding that goes into the development, that comes with a set cap. So we can't necessarily exceed that, unfortunately, based on the dollars that we have to go in. But the rest of those questions, again, those are very good questions, and I would be happy to respond to those, but we'll do it in writing.
It is unfortunate in terms of our time and what we're trying to do. One of the things I'm constantly concerned about is how much we pack into a meeting. I think we can thoroughly talk through something in 10 minutes. With this particular committee, we actually get involved and engaged. We don't want to just hear. We've got some questions for clarity. So we'll have to do a better job when we put together our time to make sure we have appropriate moments to have the conversation. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. We're going to follow up on this. That's what we're going to do. We'll make sure that we don't just leave it in the air. We will make sure to land this plane. So I appreciate your time. We're going to move to the preference policy update, and I believe, Divisha, do we have sound from Zoom? Because Divisha Gordon is joining us via Zoom. This is going to make it interesting.
Yeah, because
We've got two other presenters. Yeah.
I mean, I have my phone here. I can.
Why don't we have Divisha call you, and then we'll put it in a mic and have her give her report, and then.
I can just put my phone to the mic. I can.
Oh, you can hear through the phone.
Yeah, but it's going to give a.
Okay, I'll turn this off.
Yes.
Let me express.
No, I was just for you having.
Divisha, if you would please unmute.
Not participating. Is that that's terrible.
Yes, it is. Team.
Yes, I am still here. It is an intense echo on this end, and I'm ready to have the presentation shown. I'm not sure if it's going on.
Divisha, if you could hold for one moment, please. If you could direct some of that to me. We're trying to run the meeting, and it's awfully difficult not knowing what we're doing.
Okay.
So mute their computer, but how can they unmute their microphone so we can hear them?
She can turn her sound off, and her mic will still be on. Yes.
Okay, so Divisha, if you could turn your sound off, your mic would still be on, meaning that you can't hear yourself other than as you're talking. But can we hear her? Davisha, can you test it? Just, she's speaking and we're not getting anything. The phone to the mic creates a different level of feedback, and that's a challenge because we have people presenting to us tonight via Zoom. So,
Well, we can move the agenda around while they're working on it.
that's what I'm going to do. To those of you who are waiting on Zoom, I apologize. And Davisha, what I'm going to do once we get this resolved, because I'm sure we'll be able to do so, is we will actually have Albina Vision Trust present. And then, Davisha, we will go to you. Not that you are deprioritized. I just want to make sure that we recap as much as, or recover the time as much as we can. So I appreciate your flexibility on that. While they are working that out, and I'm sure somebody's going to give me some signals at some point, while they're working that out, we will go to Ms. Goodlow, who is here in the room, to do follow-up from the preference policy, and then we will go to our fall notice of funding availability.
Well, good evening, everyone. Leslie Goodlow, Equity and Business Operations Manager for the Portland Housing Bureau, and I just wanted to give you a brief update on the status of the concerns that were brought forward at the September meeting from the tenants and from the Portland State study that's occurring. We have several things that are kind of moving pieces. We had a meeting with the executive directors and two members of our oversight committee, Ms. Gabrielle and Dr. Holt, participated in that meeting where we were able to ask some questions, have them give us some feedback about what they heard from the tenants. And we specifically asked if they would be interested in participating in a meeting with the tenant advisory group from the Portland State study. We just today got a location and a date, so it will be held here on December 1st, I believe, and we'll be getting notices out tomorrow, well, not tomorrow, Monday, since it's a holiday, to the tenants and begin working on an agenda. We have also asked each of the building sponsors to provide us written feedback of the steps they've taken to address the issues that were specific to their buildings. We've received, I think, all but one back. I've not had a chance to review it as of yet. We received several of them today. And we are working with the commissioner's office. We got some information about the expanded business district that we can work potentially with the Seoul district about putting in a request for that, as well as looking for potentially other funding sources for security, which we know is not just an issue in these 6 buildings or 7 buildings if you include the Cascadia building, but it is an issue system-wide. So whatever resources we come up with, whatever solution we look at, we will need to be able to look for that to be useful across the system. And we will continue to update the Oversight Committee as we move forward with addressing the concerns. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? No, Gabrielle, you were there. I don't know if you want to make a comment at all about the meeting. Mike.
I did think that the meeting was good. It was good to have all of the housing directors there. I did leave that meeting still with further questions. And one of those questions that led to then is whether or not there's going to be a continuation that involves this committee in terms of going forward for that accountability piece. Because there were a lot of things that were said in that meeting that I think it's important that the whole committee have an opportunity to hear or read and to respond to.
I thought the meeting went very well also. It was great to have everyone in the space and to approach it as problem solvers. How do we collectively solve these problems? How do we lean in to find ways to address the specifics and the nuances that are involved in this moment? Some of those things which seem to be just unique to this particular arena, this world, this dynamic of affordable housing, and then some things that were specific to each property. But the overall intent, I think, was clear that there's a willingness and an investment to figure out what can be done. And I would say this, that as we, kind of referring back to what I began with my opening statement, 8 years of being committed to this process, there is obvious concern, compassion, and commitment from a host of voices. And if we can collectively leverage that, then we'll be better because of it, because all of us are smarter than any one of us. So I'm looking forward to our continued opportunity to do that work. So we'll look forward to the information.
You want to ask if anybody on,
Well, at this point, I don't
but
know
they
that
could put
would
it in
help.
the chat.
Any other committee members' comments that you might want to add to the chat? Do we have the capacity yet to hear from Zoom? Nope, can't hear you. All right, we'll move forward. Fall notice of funding availability update. Hello, Tanya and Jill.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm Tanya Wolfersberger. I'm the Housing Development and Construction Services Manager at the Bureau. And I'm joined by...
And I'm Jill Chen. I'm the Housing Investments Portfolio Preservation Manager, aka Multifamily Production.
So I think some of you all know, I think we presented here a few months ago that we released another notice of solicitation for Metro Housing Bond dollars. We released this in September, and proposals were due on November 4th, and we have received those proposals and started the evaluation process. So we wanted to just kind of give a summary of what has been received, particular to the 3 properties that are within the Interstate Corridor URA and are subject to the North-Northeast preference policy. So, can you hear me okay, Dr. Holt? Okay. You're looking at me very kindly. Jill, you want to go over some of the proposals and then I'll talk about timeline?
Sure. The first project is the Cary Boulevard. Okay, here. Thank you. Is this better? Okay, I'll talk louder. Yeah, I think it's on. The first project is Cary Boulevard. It's about a 3-acre site. Can you guys hear? Okay. It's a 3-acre site, and it was targeted for home ownership. We received 1 proposal, and I cannot tell you who it is, so we'll just go to the next one. The next one is a Strong Family site. That's another PHB-owned site, and that is about a 1-acre site. It was for both a rental and with a preference for home ownership. And we also received 1 proposal for that. And the third site is a Kaiser Permanente site. It's on the interstate, you can call it rail line, the MAX line. It's right across from Kaiser's site, and it's currently owned by Kaiser. And they will be, it's about a 1/3 of an acre site. And we received 3 proposals for that. That one is for a senior site. I should mention that Cary Boulevard was targeted as a family home ownership. We specifically said only 2 bedrooms or higher with a minimum 40 units. And Strong, we requested it also to be a family project for both rental and home ownership. And I believe that was a 75-unit site. I'm sorry, I'm getting my projects confused. There was quite a few that came in. But there was a minimum number of units as well. And we are in the process of reviewing these proposals for sort of thresholds to make sure that they met the minimum thresholds. And then there will be a, next slide, and I'll let Tanya discuss that.
Okay, so as Jill was starting to discuss our timeline, we've received all the proposals in. They've gone through an internal threshold review. Really, that is just a check to make sure that they have met all of the submission requirements of the solicitation, and as well as all of the kind of basic investment requirements that we asked for. So those minimum unit counts, maximum subsidy per unit of funding. So that threshold review just was completed today, and so now the work of the Technical and Financial Feasibility Committee starts. They will be receiving copies of proposals and working throughout the rest of this month to conduct their evaluation. Their findings will be passed on to our community review committees, who will then take up the torch and conduct their own level of evaluation that is really focused a little bit more globally in terms of experience of the developers, their experience with providing access and housing opportunities to the priority communities that are identified within the Metro Housing Bond, and also their experience and their track record in providing equitable practices, anti-racist policies, what the makeup of their boards and their staff, all of that kind of deep dive. Also looking at kind of their work within community engagement to engage communities to provide feedback on those developments. So that's kind of a very brief overview of what the work of the community review committees do. They also interview all of the project teams. So those project team interviews will be, we think we're in the process of getting those scheduled. They may be the week of December 12th. They may be a week earlier. These are all kind of rough timelines because they are predicated on availability of our committee members. So a lot of calendar doodles in their future as we get those scheduled. But our aim is to get the project team interviews and the review committee deliberations and recommendations out by the end of that second week of December, and with recommendations headed to our interim director and our commissioner right before the Christmas holidays. So that can change, obviously, but that's where we're headed.
That's fantastic. Did I understand that on two of the opportunities, there were just one responders for each, for one for Cary and one for Strong?
That is correct. So in those circumstances, that's not a given, obviously. We are going to conduct maybe even a more thorough evaluation of those proposals to make sure that they are financially feasible, they're developable, and that we believe that will produce, not only meet the goals of the housing bond, but produce a constructible and a financially feasible project that meets the goals also of the North-Northeast Oversight Committee as well.
Thank you very much. You knew where I was going.
So Jill and Tanya, what happens if one of those proposals doesn't meet financial feasibility?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the people in the back.
Yes.
In cases where the proposal does not meet, say, a technical or financial feasibility, especially when the financial feasibility, we try to work with the developer to see what is needed in order to make the project successful. There may be an occasion in which nothing is successful, and the project came in such a, you can call it raw case or bad case, that you cannot make it successful. So we do work with them a lot, work with them in terms of the design, the development, and the financing. And of course, we support them in whatever you can call additional financing they may want to or be able to seek. As we all talked about last time at the Oversight Committee, costs are increasing at an extremely fast rate. I mean, it's 1% per month, especially for the Cary site, because this is a Safe Rest Village site. We're looking at possibly not even breaking ground until 3 years down the road. So it's going to be a long development. We're also, of course, going to be working with whatever developer is selected to make sure that the concerns of the preference policy, you can call it residents, the things that Ira already mentioned are addressed, especially at the Cary site. The Cary site is a large site, so with 40 units, it should be something we can accommodate many of the concerns. It's a matter of whether the design, the permitting, and also the cost can all line up.
I would just end by saying, worst case scenario, we put it back out for solicitation if we really feel like, if the committees feel like it can't move forward. And on that note, just there's people in the room and on Zoom that will be participating in those review committees. I thank you. I also want to highlight that if you are contacted by any of our development teams, please direct them back to PHB. No one should be contacting anyone on this committee or anyone else outside of the solicitation process. Thank you.
Oh, and we should mention also, like Tanya said, we thank the Oversight Committee members a lot, especially those who are going to be joining us as part of our Community Review Committee. And obviously for those of you who are joining our Community Review Committee, reminder that these are all confidential information. And that's why we want to make sure that, it's a fair and transparent process.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Molly, were you going to add anything?
You guys covered what I was going to contribute. I did wanted, I'll add one more update. Increase. One quick update, though, on another project that we have under development called Tistalol, which is a NEA project. And I just wanted to update you all that we have, PHB has agreed to work with NEA on their preferred tenanting, which is actually the Native community, Indigenous community. So that project in particular was not funded with IKIRA TIF. It was in a pre-existing site that was regulated, so they're actually doing a tear down and rebuilding. So we're hoping we want to support them and provide keeping that land and that project be owned by a culturally specific agency that is serving the Native and Indigenous populations. And they are providing intentional tenanting around that front. And they're also doing permanent supportive housing integrated into that project. And as we are, through our continuous improvement lens, we are recognizing that blending populations like that can be challenging, provide additional challenges. So we have agreed to exempt that project from the North and Northeast Preference Policy. I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Happy to take questions, though.
I think we had discussed that prior to another meeting, so thank you for bringing it up, keeping things as much as possible transparent. I'm going to make an executive determination for tonight unless we have Zoom working. Do we have Zoom working now? Okay. So then all of each presenter who would have joined us by Zoom, again, technology is great when it works. Okay. All right. Well, hold on. So all of you who are presenting or were going to present tonight via Zoom, technology is great when it works. Unfortunately, it isn't working. And since it isn't working, I'm not going to keep you holding on and holding on and holding on. I would ask if you are available to meet in January, please do so. We'd love to bring this back and bring these items back and give you ample time to present. Hopefully, if you cannot be in person, we will have whatever the issues are resolved tonight. For the Oversight Committee members, I can imagine this is frustrating for you. It's frustrating for me. And so trying to have you engage and value your time and your investment and your commitment, which I certainly do, and I believe everyone else does as well who is here. We will try to capture as much of your thoughts as you put in chat or send via text. What cannot be responded to tonight, we will make sure gets responded to. So in light of that, you mentioned...
So, John, I see you put a question in the chat. You are asking what Molly's report means. Is that correct? I don't know if you can put a thumbs up or something. I can see you. A little bit. We're playing charades now. So the NEA project is in the interstate URA. And so based on the policies of the Bureau provided, that was set down by Commissioner Dan Saltzman, that projects within the URA are subject to the preference policy. But there is also a provision that projects can request an exception to be excluded from the preference policy. And we've done this before for a project in the early days that was going to be specific for foster children, or kids coming out of foster care and going into independent living. And so because that was such a specific population, the Oversight Committee agreed that that made sense. And in this case, NEA is requesting an exception to the preference policy because they are going to continue to serve their population, the indigenous population that they've been serving at that site. It's going to be torn down and rebuilt with a few more units. So that's what Molly's presentation was about, with a few more words and a little more background. So was that helpful? Okay, thanks, John.
Yeah, we're pantomiming. This is something.
Okay.
Okay, our next item is, thank you, Tanya and Jill. Thank you very much for the report. Ms. Goodlow and Mrs. Thompson.
Well, great news. We have done a recruitment for new Oversight Committee members. I think everybody knows we have 4 vacancies right now. Potentially more. I'm not sure if Miss Sheila is going to totally retire. I know she had mentioned it, so we may have 5 spots. But we did a recruitment through Office of Civic Life, and it was open from August 2nd through September 11th. We initially only received 4 applications, and then we opened it back up and did a little more engagement. We put it in the newsletter. We were posting it on social media. And then we got additional 9 applications. So now we have 13 people from the community that are interested in sitting on the Oversight Committee. We need some help, though, from our current Oversight Committee members. We'll need at least 2. It would be great to have 3 people sit on an interview panel with myself and Miss Gwen to interview the folks that are interested. We're going to schedule 2 different times. So because if we do 7 or 8, that's just a lot to do at one time. And we will provide the interview team with the applications and the scoring packets. So everybody will be scoring based on the same criteria. We'll schedule the interviews, collect the scores, and then once we have our cadre of people that we'd like to recommend, I will need to write a memo to the Housing Commissioner, and myself and Dr. Holt will have a conversation with Commissioner Ryan to recommend the new committee members. We're hoping to get all of that done so that the new committee members can be seated in January at our first meeting in January. So that's our hope, that we will have them selected, they can participate, and we'd like to have them the introduction and photos in the January newsletter, which Ms. Gwen is now going to talk about. And if there are questions about the selection process, we can do that after Gwen does her report.
Thank you. Gwen Thompson, Community Engagement Coordinator, also with the Bureau. Just a brief update related to the North Northeast newsletter. I wanted to share with the committee that we are getting really positive feedback on the newsletter and lots of engagement, so we're feeling good about that. Also, for our upcoming newsletter in January 2023, we just wanted to give you a heads up on some of the items that we intend to feature. So one is As per usual, we have a New Year welcome message in our January newsletter, and the author is to be decided. We're hoping that we can continue on the trend of having PHB leadership or someone on the committee write the welcome message. So if any of the members are interested in offering a wonderful New Year welcome message, please don't hesitate to reach out. Also, the next item after the welcome message is news. We're planning to write about the funding award announcement for the development of the 3 Northeast properties, if there is an award, related to the Cary Boulevard Strong property in Kaiser. There will be some brief background, the significance of land banks to the Northeast strategy and the community, as well as a feature story on the Strong property. That story has not been shared yet. We think it's an important story, the contribution of the Strong property to the strategy. Also featured will be the 50/20 groundbreaking, and we hope to introduce our new Oversight Committee members with their photos and their quotes. A couple of program updates will also be featured. One is the new rental and home ownership goals, as well as the preference policy rental application update.
So any questions about either the recruitment or the newsletter? And I see John would like to be on the interview panel. Thank you, John. Anybody else? I know we've got Felicia and Jillian on the phone. Are either of you willing to help with that, Miss Gabrielle? All right, so we got 2. We just need 1 more, and we will send it out to the rest of the committee. So thank you, John
Yes.
and Gabrielle,
Thank you
for
both.
that. We don't have any dates yet, Jillian. We're once we have our committee people, then we'll settle on a couple of dates. So with that, that's the end of our, Jillian said, assuming her calendar is free, she's happy to join.
Thank
So,
you,
Thank you,
Jillian.
Ms. Jillian.
Felicia, we will lean on you even though you didn't volunteer. Well, I will leave that there. Thank you for the report. Appreciate that. I do have a thought just around the newsletter, but it's something you and I can talk about offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Felicia said she'd be happy to assist.
I figured she would. Felicia's a trooper. She's committed. Public comment. Again, just an interesting evening. So the reality is public comment will be limited to whoever's here to have that public comment. And we are privileged and delighted to have someone who is near and dear to my heart and who's been a part of this work in a variety of spaces. Been a part of this work in a variety of spaces. One as, I think you started with PHC and then you came to PHB and now you're back with PHC. Ms. Dana Shepard. Hi, Dana.
Hi, thank you. I figured you were talking about me, so I got up when you said near and dear. Anyway, good to be here and good to see you all. First of all, I do work at Portland Housing Center now, but I am here representing the community because I am a Portland native. And so my question actually sparked from Jill's magic number 3 that she was talking about how long it's going to take for these units to be built. And it's a number that I've heard the Oversight Committee and Portland Housing Bureau talk about for so long. And it was a magic number because it was decided or determined that it takes about 3 years for people to get mortgage ready. So seems on track here. So I guess I was just wondering, based on the outreach that you all had, how are people going to feed into those? I assume that the lists that you already outreach to for the wait list either are over income or that's the thing. For the most part, I don't know what's going to be built. So I'm just wondering the plans for feeding preference policy into these new buildings with over, I think, 90 new homeownership units. So just curious because now would be the time to connect to those people. That's all.
Sure, this is John Trin with the NHP team. I've been working with the Deputy Director, Matthew, Interim Deputy Director, and he was saying that he's going to be working on the preference policy. It takes about 6 to 9 months in terms of getting the preference policy developed in terms of open up and then the solicitation. We understand it's going to take about a year to 2 years to get the individual on preference policy mortgage ready to purchase those single-family homes. And so we're using the opportunities and the timeline working with the developer once elected to, one, let them know in terms of what the community members are saying about in terms of this type of units that they'd like to see in terms of single family, and then backtrack that in terms of dating it in terms of when we're going to be opening up the preference policy list, and then start to work and feed that over to Portland Housing Center so that you could then be able to work with the individual to get them mortgage ready.
And I just want to clarify one thing, Dana. By the way, great to see you. The home ownership sites is not 90. 40 will be at Cary Boulevard. The strong site for 50 is the minimum for rental. So there was a preference for home ownership sites. We did not specify a minimum home ownership sites.
Well, John, in your response, I'm curious. My understanding is we have an ongoing, open, rolling recruitment around for the preference policy. Is that distinguished between rental and home ownership?
There's two lists. One is for rental, and that's rolling. For home ownership, preference policy is by project.
Okay. All right.
So just to add to that, I know Davisha, if you were able to hear her, she and Gwen have been working on the plan for rolling out the preference policy after the first of the year, having some monthly community meetings and advertising. We're going to do all new flyers and paraphernalia, collateral, thank you, I was trying to find the right word, for this next round, because we will additionally be having new rental projects that will be coming on. So we want to make sure that we're getting that information out, and particularly we want to give folks sufficient time to get ready, so that 3 years is not when the projects are going to be ready. We won't be able to break ground for 3 years because the Safe Rest Village has a lease to be there for 3 years. And so those units won't be ready for 5 years probably. I don't know how long it takes to build, but somewhere 18 months or something after we get control of the property back. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for those clarifications. Thank you all. I really appreciate the Oversight Committee and PHB. So thank y'all for letting me come up here.
And Davisha added, we have a robust marketing plan coming online with some rebranding and new engagement strategies, and I look forward to presenting in the new year.
Wonderful. Davisha, you've just addressed exactly what I was about to talk about.
Well, if you can hear your voice, Davisha. I just wanted to make a note. I would love just respectfully request that we call homeownership homes as opposed to units, just by virtue of it, the distinction there between rental. Thanks.
Absolutely. I would say that we are in an interesting time, that the demand and the need is not decreasing, while the resources seem to be requiring greater stretching. And I think because of that, on us, part of our work is to become more creative. And part of the creativity is to leverage relationships and other opportunities, and to have the conversations with those who sit in the seats as decision makers and elected officials. And then even talk to some of the organizations and corporations that can assist at this moment. Safe housing is a human right. And to those of us who sit in this seat and do this work, we understand that, and we value that. I was at Humboldt School yesterday morning, and having an opportunity with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders as a guest presenter. What some of you don't know is Humboldt is a block away from where I lived, where I grew up. And it brought me back to the reality of being in a duplex, if you could call it that. 2 apartments, really, one below and one above, that were not adequate. We, myself and 3 brothers, lived in what would have been the living room. It was separated by a wall and 2 glass doors. And so we had 2 bunk beds where we all slept. My sister slept in the only bedroom that was really there. And then my parents slept right off the kitchen. And I thought about the dynamic of when you're a kid, the good thing about it is you're poor, but you don't know you're poor. What you do know, though, is that there's something different about you. And I thought about, as I was sitting there with all of these incredibly intelligent, capable, gifted children, I thought about this moment we're facing and what are we doing for the generation to come. We can't be comfortable. We can't just throw our hands up and go, it's tough, it's difficult, it's hard. Kind of the conversation we had in the September meeting, that the violence, that the challenge, that the safety, and it's difficult, it's hard. Yeah, it is. But we have something we have to do. And that's why we're committed to this work. That's why we're in this space. I'm not one who likes to be on the reactionary side. My preference is to get in front of the problem and strategize it in advance. Are increasing. We can't decrease the quality of what's being provided to these families. Which means, in my mind, more of us speaking up, putting pressure on those where pressure should be placed. And expecting the kind of productivity that we can collectively do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your effort. Stay safe through the holidays. If you're traveling, safe travels. We plan on being together again in January. Those are the end of my comments. I'll let you close it out, Ms. Goodlove.
So just one reminder to the Oversight Committee, it's that time of year we will begin working on our annual report to council. I know that's everybody's favorite chore. It's always my favorite time of year. So just be thoughtful. If you have ideas or things that you want to make sure that we address in the report for next year, you can just send me an email and I'll just keep a list. And in January, we will have hopefully have some time on the agenda where we can talk about that, as we will probably go to council either in late March or early April. So that'll give us a couple months to get that ready to go. So thank you, everybody, and so sorry for our technology issues, but it's good to see your face, and happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays. Goodbye.